I was 65, respected in the church, and living a life no one could question, until he whispered my name behind the sacristy door. If you want to know what really happened inside that sacred room, hit subscribe now. Because some secrets were never meant to stay buried. You probably think you know the kind of woman I am. Modest, faithful, always sitting in the front pew on Sunday mornings. People called me the soul of the church. But if they knew what really went on behind that sacristy door, well, let's just say their Bibles might have slipped from their hands. This isn't some made-up tale or dramatic novel. It's real. 30 years ago, when I was 65, something happened. Something I've never told anyone until now. I used to go there every week, helping prepare for Mass, folding robes, lighting candles. But what started as duty became obsession. He wasn't supposed to look at me like that, and I certainly wasn't supposed to feel the way I did. I still remember his voice, low and steady, calling my name, telling me to come inside. My name is Margaret. I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania. My husband passed away 10 years before all of this began. We had a quiet life, church every Sunday, coffee with neighbors, Bible study on Wednesdays. After he died, faith was the only thing that kept me standing. I volunteered at St. Michael's. I cleaned, organized, helped prepare communion. People saw me as dependable, even holy. But inside, I was lonely, not just missing my husband. I missed being wanted, desired, alive. That's what no one could see. That's what I hid behind hymns and prayers. And when he started looking at me differently, I didn't stop him. I couldn't. It started with a look. One Sunday after Mass, he stayed behind. Father Thomas. He was younger than me by almost 20 years, with kind eyes and a voice that made you feel like God himself was speaking. That day, he thanked me for organizing the altar cloths, but his hand lingered on mine just a second too long. I should have pulled away. I should have said something, laughed it off. But I didn't. I looked at him, and in that moment I felt something I hadn't in years. A spark, a thrill, and maybe temptation. That small touch changed everything. It opened a door I didn't know I had closed. And from that day on, I couldn't stop thinking about him. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon when he called me into the sacristy for the first time. The church was empty, the sunlight filtering through stained glass, casting reds and blues across the stone floor. The scent of incense still lingered from morning Mass. He stood by the cabinet, folding his vestments with slow, deliberate hands. I remember how his collar framed his face. Neat, proper, but his eyes told a different story. When I walked in, he didn't speak right away. He just looked at me. "Margaret," he said softly, "can you help me with this?" He held up a chalice, and as I stepped closer, my fingers brushed his. My heart pounded. I told myself it was nothing, just a mistake. But then he said, "You always know how to make things feel. Sacred, that voice, that pause, that moment." It wasn't about faith anymore. It was something else entirely, something dangerous. And I knew deep down that I was already too far gone to walk away. That moment in the sacristy stayed with me. I couldn't shake it. Every time I walked into church after that, my heart raced before I even saw him. I told myself it was just admiration, respect for a man of God. But deep down, I knew better. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way his voice softened when he spoke to me. How he always found a reason to be near me after Mass. And worst of all, how I liked it. How I looked forward to it. I felt guilty. Truly, deeply guilty. This wasn't who I was. I had been a faithful wife, a devoted Christian, a woman of prayer. And yet, every time he said my name behind closed doors, I forgot all of it. I forgot my age, my past, my morals. All I could feel was alive again. It scared me, but not enough to stop. Instead, I told myself it was harmless, a little attention, a little warmth. I didn't realize then. It was the beginning of something I couldn't control. It didn't take long before our moments became routine. Every Wednesday, he'd ask me to stay behind. At first it was just small talk, how I was feeling, if I needed anything. But then, his questions became more personal. He wanted to know what I thought, how I saw the world, what made me smile. I told him about my husband, about the silence in my house at night, about how sometimes, even in a full church, I still felt alone. And he listened, not like a priest giving confession, but like someone who truly cared. One day after Mass, he placed his hand on my shoulder and said, "You carry something heavy, Margaret." His voice was soft, almost mournful. I looked up at him, and for a moment I saw something in his eyes, longing, maybe even regret. From that day on, the silences between us spoke louder than words. We never crossed a line, not physically, but emotionally. We were already miles beyond where we should have been. And when he finally whispered, "I think about you, even when I shouldn't," I knew there was no turning back. I should have walked away after he said those words. I should have prayed for forgiveness and stayed far from him. But I didn't. Instead, something inside me snapped, a lifetime of silence, of playing the role everyone expected of me. The next Wednesday, I arrived early. The church was empty, the candles still unlit. I stood by the door of the sacristy and knocked softly. When he opened it, surprise flickered in his eyes. I stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. "I've been thinking about what you said," I whispered. My voice was steady, but my heart pounded like a drum. And I don't want to pretend anymore. He didn't speak, just looked. Really looked, like he was seeing me for the first time. And in that moment, I wasn't just Margaret, the church volunteer. I was a woman who finally chose herself. It happened on a rainy afternoon in October. The church was quiet, the streets nearly empty. I had just finished helping with the weekly altar setup when he approached me, not in the sacristy, but outside, under the shelter of the church porch. "I made tea," he said, holding up a small thermos. "Would you like some?" I hesitated. This wasn't our usual moment. There were no robes, no prayers, no holy walls between us. Just two people standing in the rain, making a choice. We sat on a bench near the cemetery, sipping tea as the drops hit the ground like whispers. For the first time, we weren't hiding behind duties or conversations about faith. We were just us. He told me about his doubts, how hard it was to live by rules that sometimes felt like chains. I told him about the loneliness I used to think only prayer could heal. And then, without warning, he reached for my hand. It wasn't dramatic, no music, no lightning, just his fingers gently wrapping around mine. But it changed everything. In that moment, I realized this wasn't just a fleeting feeling. It was real and dangerous and beautiful. And I knew. I didn't want to let go. After that rainy afternoon, everything changed. We began meeting outside, the church, small cafes, quiet parks, places where no one from St. Michael's would recognize us. At first it was just tea and conversation. But slowly, we built something real, something fragile, yet powerful. We talked about everything, our pasts, our regrets, the things we never thought we'd have again. He told me how he once dreamed of a life beyond the priesthood, before duty silenced his heart. I shared memories of my husband, not with guilt, but with honesty, because love doesn't erase what came before. There were moments when the weight of what we were doing crushed me. I'd wake up in the middle of the night drenched in shame, wondering if God had turned his back on me. But then I'd see him, eyes full of warmth, voice steady with care. And I felt seen. not as a sinner, not as a widow, not as someone broken, but as a woman who still had fire in her soul. We never announced our love to anyone. We didn't need to. It lived in stolen glances, in silent handholds, in whispered prayers that now meant something different to me. We knew it couldn't last forever, but for a while, it was enough. Looking back now, I don't know if what we had was right or wrong. All I know is that it changed me. For so long, I thought love was something that only belonged to the young, that once you passed a certain age, you were meant to fade into quiet routine. But he reminded me that desire doesn't die with time. That connection can come when you least expect it, even in the most forbidden of places. Did I make mistakes? Yes. Do I regret everything? No. Because for the first time in years, I felt alive. Not just as a wife, a church member, or a widow, but as Margaret, a woman still capable of feeling, of loving, of wanting more. But all things end, and ours did too. Not with scandal, not with fire, but with silence. The kind that comes when you realize some truths are too heavy to carry forever. If you've ever loved someone you weren't supposed to, if you've ever questioned whether your heart was allowed to want something different, then maybe you understand. So tell me, do you believe love has rules? If this story moved you, hit subscribe, and let's keep telling the stories no one dares to speak out loud.